Attorney General Barr, has the President or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone?
I wouldn't.
Yes or no?
Could you repeat that question?
I will repeat it.
Yeah.
Has the President or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
The President or anybody else?
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Yeah, but I'm trying to grapple with the word suggest. I mean, there have been discussions of matters out there that they have not asked me to open an investigation, but
Perhaps they've suggested,
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
hinted,
I don't know.
inferred. You don't know.
Attorney General William Barr never answered that question from California Senator Kamala Harris. Today, Senator Harris followed up in a letter to the Inspector General at the Department of Justice. Dear Inspector General Horowitz, I write to express grave concern about the independence of the Department of Justice under the leadership of Attorney General William Barr. On May 1st, Attorney General Barr appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee to discuss the conclusion of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. In response to my questions during the hearing, Attorney General Barr proved unable or unwilling to state whether he'd been directed to open investigations at the request or suggestion of the President or other White House officials. An alarming response that strikes at the very heart of the rule of law and threatens to undermine the longstanding independence of the Justice Department. In light of the disturbing conduct documented in the special counsel's report, as well as Attorney General Barr's failure to demonstrate his own independence from the President on such matters, I urge the Office of Inspector General to investigate whether the AG has received or acted upon requests, suggestions, whether implied or explicit, to investigate the President's perceived enemies. Sincerely, Senator Kamala Harris. Joining us now for the interview is Senator Kamala Harris. She is a California senator. She is a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate. Senator Harris, thank you for being here.
Of course, of course. Thank you, Rachel.
So that moment from the hearing has been seen as a sort of crystallization about not only Attorney General Barr having trouble facing tough questions, but also some of the sort of can of worms that has opened here. The Mueller report was only in some very small and specific ways about the prospect that the President is ordering criminal investigations of his perceived enemies.
Right.
Was the Attorney General's response to you actually a surprise to you? I wondered when you were asking that if you expected him to be able to give you a clean no.
I hoped he would give a clean no. But I think that we also know something about this Attorney General, which is he is smart enough to know the words that he speaks and to speak them in a way that he can actually read them on a transcript as he's speaking them. And he's smart enough to know that if he speaks certain words, he will perjure himself and face criminal charges himself. And so I think he was buying time for himself by asking that the question be repeated. And he was parsing his language, knowing that if he answered explicitly the question asked and with a yes or a no, either he opened up a can of worms if the answer is yes, or if the answer is no, he would have perjured himself. So he didn't answer.
Do you believe that it's possible that he has been getting direction from the White House or from the President about opening investigations into the President's perceived enemies? Do you think that is what's happening?
Based on his non-response, I am now suspicious. And which is why I've asked the Office of the Inspector General to actually investigate this. Because, of course, the Attorney General is supposed to act on behalf of the people and not act as the President's henchman. And if, in fact, there has been any influence by the President over the Attorney General, we should know that, and that's something that should be investigated and disclosed and discovered, obviously.
Is there any other way to get at that? I say that as a member of the Judiciary Committee. Obviously, the Judiciary Committee has a lot of high-profile roles, including interrogating witnesses the way that you did so ably this week. But also, you have oversight over the Justice Department. Is that something the committee should be investigating directly in addition to asking the IG?
I do believe that we should be. I don't know that we will.
Yeah.
You know, the chairman of the committee has said, even when we have requested that Bob Mueller come to give us direct information about his investigation in the report, the chairman of the committee has rejected that request. So I don't know if it will actually happen. It should happen, Rachel. It absolutely should happen. I mean, part of the issue that is really at play is the integrity of our system of justice. Literally. This is the top law enforcement and top law official of the United States Department of Justice, who through his testimony and then all of the weeks leading up to him testifying before us has called into question his integrity, has called into question his ability to be unbiased, to do the work of justice, to do the work of pursuit of truth, pursuit of fact. This has now been called into question. And Rachel, the way I think about it also is every day in America, there are people walking into courthouses around our country, state courthouses, federal courthouses. And they're going to walk into those courthouses skeptical of whether justice actually occurs in those places. And that is real. That is a real consequence when we see the kinds of behaviors we've been seeing out of this administration, which is it is undermining people's confidence in our democracy. And that is not an overstatement. Not to mention what we're communicating to our friends and foes around the world. One of the greatest strengths of who we are, it's almost intangible, but it is very real. One of our greatest strengths as a nation is that we have a system of democracy that we will fight for, that we will die for. And one of the most significant pillars in that system is our justice system. Now, we know it is imperfect and we know it is deeply flawed in many ways. But when the highest official in the land presents himself to the world the way we just witnessed, I think it calls into question the integrity of the system overall.
I want to play you one more little piece of sound from the hearing. You guys, this is in the control room. This is sound number 1. This was Senator Graham was actually asking, the chairman of the committee, Republican, was asking the Attorney General some fairly low-key questions. And they ended up veering in a way that I certainly don't think Senator Graham expected. I certainly didn't expect it watching it. They veered pretty quickly into the Attorney General explaining why he thought it was legal and it was not obstruction of justice for the president to fire, for any president, to fire any prosecutor investigating him or her if the president didn't think the investigation was a good one. It was a short construct, but this is what he said.
If it was based on false allegations, the president does not have to sit there constitutionally and allow it to run its course. The president could terminate that proceeding, and it would not be a corrupt intent because he was being falsely accused.
If the president believes that he or she is falsely accused, then he or she is legally and constitutionally empowered to fire anybody who is investigating that president. That was right at the beginning of the hearing, and I sort of felt like, well, let's all go home now. What was your take on that moment? What happens now that he's asserted that?
Right. So let's also point out that the flaw in his logic is that he is then reinforcing the idea that justice is a subjective concept. Depending on how you perceive the treatment that you receive, you can make decisions about how the system works.
Well, everybody knows that people who know there are good people don't get arrested. Right?
That's
how we do it, right? I know I'm a good person, therefore I am immune to arrest.
Right, therefore.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about people who are in a position to make decisions about the lives, the liberty of other people, such as the Attorney General of the United States, the President of the United States, we need to have integrity in that system. And the suggestion by this Attorney General that the President of the United States could shut down an investigation because he perceives it to be unfair is ridiculous. I mean, there are legal terms, but it's actually just ridiculous. And that statement further reinforces the point, which is that this Attorney General does not think of himself as being an objective, neutral player on this issue. But then we know because he actually submitted a 19-page resume for the job. And then only 2 days after receiving the Mueller report, which was a report based on 2 years of, you can believe, around-the-clock investigation by some of the top lawyers in the justice system ever. In 2 days, he submits a summary, clearly designed, his so-called summary, to influence the public's perception of the nature and the findings of that investigation. He clearly waited a long period of time before then sharing that report with the public. Remember, part of his testimony, he talked about the fact that, barely 10% of the report has been redacted. Well, why did it take you so darn long to redact the thing? You could summarize the thing in 2 days, and it takes you that long to redact it? So the logic does not hold. And when he then makes a statement to say that the president can shut down an investigation because he doesn't like the way it's working, is absolutely ludicrous.
And the question, of course, is whether it's controlling precedent now that he's articulated that as Attorney General. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Senator Kamala Harris of California right after this. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.